Gaining distance from a narcissist is not avoidance. Do you worry that creating distance between yourself and a narcissistic parent, partner, or family member is avoiding something that you should confront? Well, Bernard was another fictionalized client who came to therapy in his mid-20s to find relief from the constant anxiety he experienced in his life. And we quickly came to understand that he had grown up with a narcissistic father who acted in a very domineering way around the house and would grow enraged if Bernard responded with anything but obedience. So it was no wonder that Bernard grew particularly anxious, expressing a difference of opinion to people at work or in his personal life. And at the time, Bernard was attending family dinners at his parents' home every Sunday at the time he started therapy. But he described how inevitably at these dinners, somebody would do something that displeased his father. His father would view this as a sign of unforgivable disrespect and proceed to berate, intimidate, and yell at the offender, either Bernard or his mother. He was an only child. Well, in therapy, I inferred that Bernard held the unconscious belief that he didn't deserve protection. And when we discussed the prospect of limiting his attendance at these dinners, given how abusive his father would treat him, Bernard said that he felt like he would be running away from the problem if he did this. And I want to bring up this example of Bernard because I don't think it's uncommon that survivors of narcissistic abuse can believe that if they don't head-on confront a narcissistic abuser, that they're somehow shirking something they should do or shirking a responsibility. In today's video, I'm going to make the case that an honest assessment of the possibilities in prolonged interaction with a narcissistic abuser suggests that trying to confront the situation will just not be productive. Then I'm going to describe the cost to you, the survivor, in trying to confront such individuals. And then last, I'll describe the difference between avoiding an interaction that should be addressed versus protecting yourself from interactions that might only be detrimental to you. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California who specializes in helping people recover from narcissistic abuse. And narcissistic abuse can really leave the survivor feeling lost and estranged from your very sense of who you are. In an individual therapy and through my online course on recovery from narcissistic abuse, I try to offer a map that allows survivors to come back to the quality of life they know they deserve in a deep way. Of course, each survivor must travel this path themselves, but I think a map can be tremendously important to help in doing this. And I think there are three key features on this map that I call the 3 pillars to recovery. The first pillar is making sense of what happened, so you know that the narcissistic abuse was not your fault. And the second pillar is gaining psychological, emotional, and perhaps physical distance from the narcissistic abuser. And the third pillar is living in defiance of the narcissist rules. And lastly, and very importantly, I think one can't do this in a vacuum. It's also essential to find and participate in communities of people who can get, validate, and support you on this path. So today's video falls under the third pillar of gaining distance from the narcissistic abuser. And if you were a scapegoat survivor of a narcissistic parent or partner, then I encourage you to check out my free ebook on the topic. It's called Surviving Narcissistic Abuse as the Scapegoat, and it goes into other important aspects of what it's like to be in the shoes of the scapegoat child or partner, from self-limiting beliefs about yourself that you must adopt to survive, to why the narcissistic personality is so geared to put those closest to them down. I think this ebook can help you realize how none of this abuse was your fault, but was rather the product of the narcissist's psychological and emotional pathology. And you can find the link to the book in the description box below or by clicking here. So what is there to be gained by confronting a narcissistic abuser? I think it's important to pose this question to oneself whenever considering addressing a problem in a relationship. Hopefully most people that you are in relationship with have the capacity to hear you with an open mind, show a concern for your feelings in the relationship, and prioritize the health of the relationship over being right. And I don't mean that every relationship should meet these 3 criteria every time or all the time, but in general more often than not. But when it comes to addressing a narcissistically abusive person with your discontent over how they are treating you or have treated you, I think this question becomes especially important. Consider that a narcissistically abusive person has to elevate their sense of self-worth to feel intact psychologically and emotionally. And I think this elevation consists of seeing themselves as superior, more deserving, and more important than others. Then out of this inflated view of themselves, something called grandiosity in the world of psychology, they take license to act in a domineering, intrusive, and vindictive fashion to the people in their lives. A narcissistic person is often constantly on watch to see who is not complying with their sense of entitlement to be revered as more important, seen as wiser, and perceived as holding more authority than those other people. So with all of this in mind, what is to be gained from telling a narcissistic abuser that you're unhappy with their treatment of you? I'd argue very little. The most likely outcome is a vindictive attack aimed at undermining the basis for your complaint, your character, and maybe your reputation to others. So as such, I think confronting a narcissist would endanger your psychological, emotionally, and potentially physical safety if the narcissistic person feels wounded and then levels rage at you and can get unhinged and physically violent towards you. So that's why I would argue it doesn't so much work to confront a narcissistic abuser. But now, why is gaining distance from a narcissistic abuser self-care and not avoidance? Well, if you were walking in the woods and came across a rattlesnake sunning itself in the middle of the path, what would you do? Pretty sure the answer would be to walk around the serpent or, to spare yourself any kind of untoward exchange with it. Would that be considered avoidance or an act of self-care? I think a rattlesnake can't be talked out of doing the only thing it knows to do to survive, what it perceives to be as a threat, which would be you, the hiker, going to step on them, potentially in the eyes of this rattlesnake who apparently has a lot of inner thoughts. But similarly, someone with untreated narcissistic personality disorder can't be talked out of doing the only thing they know how to do when their inflated sense of self-worth gets threatened. And that is to attack, coerce, and devalue the source of the threat without any concern for the feelings of the person who's posing this threat to them. So if you walk around a rattlesnake, or you, in essence, figuratively walk around a parent or partner with narcissistic personality disorder, then the benefit seems to be to ensure your own survival and not put yourself in harm's way. And to me, that's the essence of self-care. It's not avoidance. So there's one common sticking point, and it's named guilt. When you've survived narcissistic abuse, particularly by a parent, you may experience a strong feeling of responsibility for that narcissistic person's emotional well-being. And this was likely assumed to ensure your survival because when the narcissistic parent or partner is unhappy, then nobody close to them can be happy either. So securing their happiness before your own could have been quite necessary. And this may also lead to experiencing the narcissistic parent to be fragile in an emotional sense and at risk of being destroyed if you don't continually protect them in this way. And I think such thoughts and feelings can result in you feeling extremely guilty for taking care of yourself before taking care of them, no matter how unfair, objectively speaking, you may know this to be. In addition to guilt, you might also feel fear just from the conditioned response that if you're not prioritizing their care over yours, an attack might ensue. And that might just be known in your body. So you may feel a sense of kind of intense dis-ease as you kind of practice this act of self-care. And I encourage, as always, kind of compassion and patience with yourself to kind of tolerate as much of that dis-ease as you can so that over time that response is kind of gradually extinguished in the world of kind of classical conditioning. And similarly, I think this guilt that can happen takes time and patience to resolve during the process of recovery. And I'd encourage you to work to afford yourself that compassion and patience as you work towards this. I mean, the goal is to notice when you might be taking more responsibility on for others' emotional well-being than your own, and then kind of gently exercise compassion towards yourself to just begin to consider redrawing the lines of jurisdiction for what you're responsible for and what you are not responsible for in relationships. And one tool that can help with this that I'd like to point you to is my free webinar on 7 self-care tools to help you recover from narcissistic abuse. And in this free webinar, I show you 2 specific daily exercises you can use to exercise patience and gratitude towards yourself. And in my experience, practicing such exercises builds over time a new sense that you also are deserving of your own care and attention, that it's not just others deserving of that. And this type of practice, at again a patient and measured pace, can be a really strong antidote to the feelings of responsibility for others' emotions before your own. Well, thanks for tuning in this week. I hope you found this discussion helpful in your own process of recovery. And I want to thank everyone again for your continued engagement, comments to the channel, and suggestions for video topics. They've all been, I take them all in, although I can't respond to comments just due to time limitations, but the video topics are very much appreciated, and I look forward to posting videos on those topics in the future as well. Well, take good care, and I will see you next week.